For 22 years, Brigadier General Owen Tremblay sat in a wheelchair, while every neurologist in the country told his family the same 3 words: nothing more possible. He had been paralyzed from the waist down since an IED blast outside Kandahar in 2003, and in that time, his daughter had driven him to hospitals in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. She had taken him twice to specialists in the United States. She had written letters that went unanswered and made phone calls that ended in waiting lists. When she drove him 4 hours from Sudbury to the Harwick Medical Center in Toronto on a grey Tuesday in March, she told herself it was the last time. She meant it. The department chief dismissed the general in under 6 seconds and instructed the floor nurse to show them out. But the nurse, a quiet woman in blue scrubs with a small tarnished pin above her name tag and a thin scar running across her right wrist, looked at the crease of skin at the base of the general's skull and recognized something that nobody in 22 years had thought to look for. Something she had spent 4 years studying in a basement facility outside Ottawa, inside a program that on paper had never existed. And when her hands found what lay beneath that scar, 22 years of silence began to crack. If this story is pulling you in, do me a quick favor before we go any further. Tap the like button, drop a comment letting me know what city or province or country you're listening from, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Welcome to Steady Badge's Stories. Let's begin. Dr. Victor Ashford did not enjoy Tuesdays. He stood at the consultation desk on the 4th floor of Harwick Medical Center in a white coat that had been pressed by someone other than himself, his reading glasses pushed to the top of his head, his gray hair swept back with the particular authority of a man who had been photographed for the cover of a medical journal twice and expected a third. His nameplate read, Chief Division of Neurology. He considered this sufficient biography. Iris Langdon did not stand at desks, she moved. She had been on the floor since 6 in the morning, and by 8:30 she had restocked the supply cart in Bay 3, helped a resident recalibrate an IV line, talked a post-stroke patient's husband through his wife's discharge paperwork, in a voice low enough not to wake the woman sleeping 3 feet away, and still had time to refill her own coffee before Dr. Ashford's arrived. She was 42 years old, 5'4". Her auburn hair was pulled back in a clip at the base of her neck, the kind of clip you buy at a pharmacy and forget is there. Her scrubs were the bright teal blue of the Harwick nursing staff. Above her name tag, so small you had to lean in to see it, was a pin. A silver compass rose on a dark field, slightly bent at the top where it had been dropped once and not quite straightened. Nobody on the floor had ever asked about it. Her right wrist, the one she rested against the chart rail, had a scar. A thin horizontal line, pale now, running from the base of her thumb to halfway up the forearm. The kind of scar a hand surgeon makes only if she knows exactly what she is looking for. Or the kind a field medic makes on herself when there is no hand surgeon available and the alternative is worse. Langdon. Ashford did not look up from his files. Tell admissions I want the 9 o'clock files on my desk before I sit down and get someone to check on Bay 7. Family referral from up north. I haven't decided whether I'll see it. She had already pulled the Bay 7 file. She walked down the hall. Through the glass panel of Bay 7 she could see 3 people. A woman in her early 40s with dark brown hair pulled into a braid, standing behind a wheelchair with both hands on the handles. A young man, maybe 21, 22, in a Laurentian University sweatshirt sitting on the exam stool with his hands in his lap, and in the chair a man. He had been large once. She could see it in the width of his shoulders, in the way his chest still held some of its breadth even folded inward the way it was. He wore a dark green fleece over a collared shirt, buttoned to the top. His hands lay open on his knees, palms up in the way of a person who had stopped reaching for things. And just below his left ear, at the base of his skull where the neck met the hairline, there was a scar. A small, careful line, maybe 4 centimeters, old and pale, almost invisible unless the light caught it from the right angle. The kind of incision that a civilian hospital's intake nurse would note as old scar, healed, unremarkable, without a second thought. Iris's hand stopped on the door handle. She had last seen that scar on a cadaver in a basement in Ottawa, in a building on the edge of CFB Rockcliffe that had no signage on the outside. She had been 30 years old. She had been a captain. She pushed the door open. Good morning, I'm Iris Langdon. I'll be your intake nurse this morning. The woman with the braid spoke first, Sylvie Tremblay. My brother Adrian is over there, and this is my father. The man in the chair did not look up right away. Brigadier General Owen Tremblay, Sylvie said. Canadian Forces retired. Iris did not let her face change, but something in the architecture of the morning shifted slightly, the way a compass needle swings when it finds its bearing. It's an honor to meet you, sir. The general raised his head then. His eyes were the color of Lake Superior in November, dark gray, flat and very still. He had the jaw of a man who had made decisions in loud places and not regretted them. The skin beneath his eyes was the particular gray of someone who had been tired for a long time and had stopped fighting the tiredness. Ma'am. Sylvie kept talking because someone had to. We've been to the Sunnybrook, we've been to the Ottawa Civic, we went twice to a clinic in Rochester. My father was injured in Kandahar in 2003, IED blast. L2 spinal lesion complete, every doctor says the same thing. But last year, a doctor at the Rideau Military Family Resource Center mentioned that Dr. Ashford here had done some research on nerve pathway recovery. We waited 5 months for this appointment. Iris looked at the file in the folder. She did not open it. She already knew the shape of what was inside. May I take your vitals, General? He looked at her. Go ahead. She wrapped the cuff, set her stethoscope. 65, 128/82, cool, dry skin. Then she moved the fleece collar gently aside, just a centimeter. The scar was cleaner up close, 4 centimeters lateral behind the left mastoid process, a precise line. The kind made for access to the vagal trunk and the deep cervical nerve root. Not the kind taught in any Canadian medical school in 2003. Not the kind found in any civilian surgical manual before 2019, when the program that had developed it was finally declassified. General, did anyone perform a procedure on your neck in the field, before the medevac? He looked at her for a long moment. His jaw moved once. There was a corpsman, Hardeep, call sign Stitch. He did something before they got me on the bird. I never knew what, and I never asked. You don't always want to know what's been done to keep you alive. Iris closed the collar back over the scar. She stood. Thank you, sir. The door swung open. Dr. Victor Ashford walked in without knocking. He lifted the chart, flipped 2 pages, set it down. Mr. Tremblay. Sylvie straightened. General Tremblay. Dr. Ashford looked at her as though she had corrected his pronunciation of his own name. Mr. Tremblay, I have reviewed your imaging and your prior consultation notes. There is nothing here that requires further discussion. The lesion at L2 is complete and has been documented as such by 4 separate neurologists at 3 institutions. You are 22 years post-injury. There is no surgical approach, no therapy protocol, and no emerging research that applies to your situation. I can refer you to long-term care planning through our social work department. Langdon, when you've finished vitals, please begin discharge. He turned toward the door. Sylvie's hands went white on the wheelchair handles. Adrian stood up from the stool. The general did not move. He had heard dismissal before, in other rooms, from men with more hardware on their shoulders than Ashford had ever stood next to. He had learned to receive it the way stone receives weather. Something in that particular stillness, the trained stillness of a man who had decided long ago that dignity was the only thing left to protect, broke something loose in Iris Langdon. Dr. Ashford. He stopped. Her voice was level quiet and somehow filled the room the way a very calm sound can fill a very still space. May I have a word with you in the hall? It was not a question. Ashford turned slowly, the way men turn when they are deciding whether to be amused or annoyed. He chose amused. Langdon, I don't take clinical direction from nursing staff. Finish the discharge. Dr. Ashford. Same volume. The general's eyes moved to her face. Ashford's mouth thinned. Very well, 2 minutes. She followed him into the corridor. The hallway was empty except for a porter pushing a linen cart at the far end. Ashford crossed his arms, make it short. Iris did not cross her arms, her hands stayed open at her sides. The general has a scar at the base of his left skull, posterior to the mastoid, approximately 4 centimeters, lateral access, clean margins. About 22 years old. Ashford stared at her, and it's a deep cervical axonal access incision. The procedure was developed by a joint Canadian Forces and SOCOM medical research group between 2001 and 2008. It was classified until 2019. It's not in any civilian neurology literature, and it was never taught outside that program. The incision is the entry point for a subdermal axonal bridge, a passive neural relay implanted at the cervical root to maintain conduction continuity across a damaged spinal segment by routing low-frequency signal along the vagal pathway as a secondary circuit. Ashford had gone very still. What you're describing doesn't exist. It exists, doctor. It just doesn't exist in your journals. If General Tremblay received that implant within 2 hours of injury, which the timing of Corporal Singh's field intervention would suggest, his cord at L2 may not be fully transected. It may have entered a sustained conduction block. 22 years of disuse atrophy layered on top of an intact underlying structure. Ashford's jaw tightened. Langdon, I am going to ask you to return to that room, discharge this patient, and then go to administration and submit a formal incident report for conduct unbecoming your role. Iris turned and walked back into Bay 7. Sylvie was standing exactly where she had been. Adrian had not moved. The general had lifted his head and was watching the door. Iris walked to the side of the wheelchair. She crouched down until her face was level with his. General Tremblay. Her voice was very quiet. I would like to examine the back of your neck and the base of your skull. With your permission, I'm not going to make you any promises. I haven't done this in 7 years. But I believe the medic in the field that night may have left something in your body that no doctor in this country has known to look for, and I think it may still be working." He looked at her for a long time. He looked at the compass pin above her name tag. He looked at the scar on her wrist. In 40 years of service, Brigadier General Owen Tremblay had learned that the most dangerous people in any room were usually the quietest ones. He had learned to watch the ones who didn't explain themselves. He read her now. He lifted his chin half an inch. "Yes, ma'am." The door opened. Ashford was back and his expression had settled into something colder. "General Tremblay will be discharged in 10 minutes. Langdon, assist the family to the elevator and then come see me in my office." Iris did not stand. She did not look at Ashford. She kept her eyes on the general. "General. Doctor, I am going to perform a brief neurological assessment with the patient's consent. It will take approximately 8 minutes. After that, the family can make their own decision." "You will do nothing of the sort." Sylvie stepped forward. "We want her to. We have been to 6 hospitals and nobody has given my father 10 minutes of a real examination." Adrian was already on his feet, standing beside the wheelchair with the particular quiet stubbornness of a young man who has decided where he stands. The general did not raise his voice. He said one word. "Enough." It was enough. He looked at Ashford directly for the first time. "Doctor, I have been given orders by everyone from a corporal to a lieutenant general. I have had my legs and arms inside aircraft in active fire, and my name on documents that are still sealed. I don't require your permission to allow this woman to put her hands on the back of my neck for 8 minutes." Ashford opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. Iris stood. She went to the supply cabinet and opened it. She removed a penlight, a reflex hammer, and then from the bottom of her own work bag, a small flat pouch, dark gray nylon, sealed with a zip tie that had never been cut, unmarked. She had carried it in the bottom of that bag for 7 years, every shift she had ever worked at Harwick Medical Center. She set it on the rolling tray. "What is that?" Ashford had stepped forward. "A neural contact array." "A what?" "It's a 10-point passive stimulation mat. Copper contacts on a flexible substrate, manually applied, matched frequency protocol. It was designed for assessment and partial reactivation of dormant subdermal axonal bridges." She unzipped the tie and unfolded the mat on the tray. 10 small copper contacts caught the fluorescent light in a line. "Where did you get that?" "I built it, in Ottawa, in 2013. Ashford's face had lost some of its color around the temples. "That is not sanctioned equipment." "The program it came from was declassified in 2019, Doctor. The protocols are public record. Would you like me to pull the D&D reference number?" Ashford said nothing. He said nothing for long enough that the silence became its own kind of answer. "General, may I have your permission to remove your fleece and shirt to the waist?" "Yes." Sylvie moved first. She unzipped her father's fleece with hands that trembled slightly for the first time that morning. Adrian lifted the collar of the shirt free. The general leaned forward without being asked. His bare back was the back of a man who had been strong and had been still for too long. Pale, with the particular thinness of long disuse across the lower back and hips, and at the very base of his skull, just below the hairline on the left side, there was a second mark, round, small, barely 6 millimeters, easy to miss, easy to call an old cyst removal or a healed skin tag. Iris closed her eyes for 2 seconds. "Dr. Ashford." She did not turn around. "Come and look at this, please, because if I'm right, and I believe I am, this is going to be published, and your name will be on the paper or it won't, and that decision is yours to make in the next 30 seconds. She heard him take 2 steps. She placed the pad of her right index finger, the hand with the scar, gently against the small round mark at the base of the general's skull. Her left hand rested flat between his shoulder blades. She pressed, very lightly. The general made a sound, a single sharp intake of breath, controlled, the kind of sound a man makes when something he stopped expecting 22 years ago sends back a faint signal from a long way away. Sylvie's hand went to her mouth. Adrian stood very still. Ashford took 3 steps forward. "What did you just do?" "I pressed on the implant marker. It's a passive subcutaneous marker, approximately 5 millimeters, placed adjacent to the bridge terminus. It tells anyone who knows the protocol that this patient received a subdermal axonal bridge in the field. The bridge doesn't repair a damaged cord. It maintains a parallel conduction route, low-amplitude signal running through the vagal pathway as a secondary circuit, indefinitely, as long as the implant is intact." Ashford's voice had gone very quiet. "That technology does not exist." "It does, Doctor. It just doesn't exist in your literature yet." She turned around then and looked at him. "Sir," the general felt that pressure. His left trapezius contracted on contact. "That means signal is moving. That means there is a road. It may be a very long road, but it exists." She turned back to the general. Sir, I'm going to lay the mat across your lower back, contacts down. You may feel heat, pins and needles or nothing. If you feel pain, say so and I stop immediately. Go ahead. Adrian moved without being told. He knelt in front of his father and let the general lean his weight forward against him, bare back exposed. Iris unfolded the mat across the lumbar spine. Contacts aligned with the protocol markers she had memorized in a basement in Ottawa when she was 30 years old. From a small inside pocket, she removed a key fob-sized controller. One dial, one button. She turned it to the first setting. She pressed the button. The general's breath changed. Where do you feel that? Left side, thigh down to the knee. Sylvie was crying. Quietly, completely. The way a person cries when they have been holding their breath for 22 years and something finally gives. Iris turned the dial. She pressed the button again. The general's right quadriceps contracted. Not a spasm, not an involuntary jerk. A deliberate, ordered contraction, small and unmistakable, visible through the fabric of his trousers. He looked down at his own leg. He did not speak. Adrian lowered his head to his father's hands and pressed his forehead there, and cried the way young men cry who have been told their whole lives to be strong, which is to say he made no sound at all, and the tears just ran. Iris set the controller on the tray. She looked at Dr. Ashford. He was standing 2 feet from the wheelchair. His tablet had been forgotten in his right hand. His arms were at his sides. Doctor, I need an MRI of the full lumbar and cervical spine with contrast, an EMG of both lower extremities, and a peripheral nerve conduction study. I need the general and his family to have a room tonight. I need a physiatrist who has worked with chronic disuse atrophy. I need all of that today. Ashford looked at the general. He looked at the mat. He looked at Iris. He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame, and came back. I'll make the calls. Then he said very quietly, Langdon, who are you? Iris folded the mat and set it back in the pouch. I'm the floor nurse, doctor. A pause. Please go and order the MRI. By 11 o'clock, the neurology ward at Harwick Medical Center was running in the particular controlled urgency of a department that knows something significant is happening and doesn't yet know how to name it. Doctor, a day's OB from radiology had cleared the imaging suite herself after a phone call from Ashford that she described afterward as the strangest conversation she'd had in 15 years of practice. A portable EMG cart waited outside Bay 7. Iris stood at the nurse's station writing in pencil on a yellow notepad, not in the electronic chart, in pencil. In the shorthand of someone who had written reports that other people were not allowed to read. Contact response L quadriceps setting 1. R calf setting 3 distal toe response R foot. Patient pain report negative. Sensory report positive. Paresthesia left lateral thigh. Implant marker palpated C1-C2 junction lateral intact. She underlined intact. Sylvie came to find her. My father wants to speak with you. Inside Bay 7, the general had been dressed again. His fleece was zipped. His shoulders sat differently than they had at 9 o'clock. Not dramatically, a quarter inch maybe, but enough. Before they take me down to the scanner, he said, I'd like to know something. Sir. Your name, your real name. Iris pulled the exam stool across the floor and sat down at his level. She placed her hands on her knees. My name is Iris Langdon, that part is true. But not all of it. No, sir, not all of it. He waited. He was a patient man. Iris looked at Sylvie, then at Adrian, then back at the general. Captain Iris Langdon, she said quietly. Canadian Forces retired. Medical officer with the Joint Special Operations Medical Research Unit, based at CFB Rockcliffe, Ottawa 2012 to 2016. We studied long-term outcomes in service members who had received subdermal axonal bridges in the field between 2001 and 2008. Most of those soldiers never made it home. The ones who did, we tracked them. We were developing a rehabilitation protocol. We were 6 months from submitting our findings when the program was defunded. The research was sealed. I filed 3 formal objections. I lost all 3. I resigned my commission in 2017. I went to nursing school. I came to Toronto. Sylvie's hand covered her mouth. The general said, Why nursing? Because, sir, she stopped, looked at the window, because when I left the forces, I had a list of 43 names. 43 men and women who had received the implant and survived. When the program was closed, I was ordered to have no further contact with any of them. Not to tell them what they'd been given in the field, not to tell their families, not to tell them there might still be signal in their cords. I tried every channel available to me. I was told no. I resigned. I came here because I didn't know what else to do with what I knew, except be somewhere a person like you might walk through the door one day. She paused. I have worked at Harwick for 7 years. I have never opened that pouch until this morning. The general was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I was on your list. Yes, sir. How long have you known? I read your intake file this morning, but I knew your name from the list. You were number 9. He closed his eyes. He kept them closed for almost a full minute. Then he opened them, and his voice was the voice of a man who had commanded 1,200 people from a forward operating base, and had also sat in a wheelchair for 22 years, and knew the weight of both. Ms. Langdon, I owe you an apology. I have spent 22 years believing that I was a man whose body had been broken beyond repair. I stopped hoping in 2008. I told my children to stop. I told my wife before she passed to stop. I have spent 2 decades being wrong about my own body, and the only reason I'm not still wrong this morning is because you came into this room and looked at my neck. Iris did not answer right away. He reached across the space between them and held his right hand out. She took it. His grip was firm and quiet, the grip of a man conserving exactly as much as he needed. Captain, thank you. Her throat tightened once. She nodded. She did not let go of his hand for a moment. The MRI results came back at 2 o'clock. Dr. Obi carried them to the staff lounge herself rather than send them through the system. She found Iris there with a cold cup of tea and a yellow notepad covered in pencil. Sit down, Obi said. She set her tablet on the table face down and looked at Iris for a moment. The cord at L2 is not transected, it is compressed. Severely atrophied, scarred tissue on the exterior, but the dura is intact, and there is a signal running along the lateral column. I have been reading spinal imaging for 18 years. I have never seen anything like it. It looks like a... She paused. Like a secondary filament. That's the bridge. Yes. Obi's hand was resting on the tablet, and it was trembling very slightly. How did no one see this? The signal is only visible if you know the specific frequency to amplify in the contrast sequence. The protocol was in the declassification packet DND released into 2019. Published as a technical appendix in a bulletin that went to military medicine offices, not civilian hospitals. So we never would have known. No. Obi stood. She picked up the tablet, she looked at the door and then back at Iris. There are other people like him. 42 others that I know of. She did not say anything else. She walked out with the careful steps of a person who has just been given an enormous piece of information and does not yet know where to put it. The EMG came back an hour later. Strong residual motor neuron activity in both quadriceps, the right calf and the left tibialis anterior. The hamstrings were weak but present on both sides. Iris wrote the numbers down in pencil. Her hand did not shake. At 3:30, she was in the corridor outside the general's room when Sylvie met her. Sylvie did not ask a question, she just stood there. He has the cord to work with, Iris said. He has the motor neurons to work with, he has the signal delivery. He will need 6 months of the most intensive physiotherapy of his life. But yes, I believe your father is going to stand. Sylvie turned away. She walked 3 steps down the corridor and put her hand flat on the wall and stood there. Her back was to Iris. Her shoulders shook once and then were still. Iris let her. The administrative meeting was at 4. Dr. Eleanor Cross, Chief of Medical Staff, a small precise woman in a charcoal blazer who ran meetings the way a conductor runs an orchestra, efficiently without repeating herself. Ashford was present. Legal was present, the head of patient relations. A liaison from Veterans Affairs Canada. Cross wanted to know about the mat. Iris told her the truth. She had built it from components approved under the research program. It had been signed out under her name in the final inventory. The program had been declassified. She had broken no law. The Veterans Affairs liaison wanted to transfer the general to a military facility. Sylvie, speaking for her father, said no. Adrian said no. Ashford said no. Iris said nothing because the family had already said it. Then Cross asked the question Iris had been waiting for. Captain Langdon, how many others? 43 originally. 31 alive when I last had access to the list 7 years ago. 3 of those I already know have passed from unrelated causes. Cross looked at Ashford. Ashford did not look surprised. He had spent the last 4 hours making calls he had not expected to make and had been told things he had not expected to be told. I want a task force, Cross said. I want it operational within the week. Langdon, you'll lead it. At 5 o'clock, they moved Iris to a small office on the 2nd floor, adjacent to the medical library. A desk, a phone, a window that looked out over the parking structure on Elm Street. She did not need anything else. She called the number she had kept for 7 years in the back of a notebook she had carried through 2 moves in a flood. It rang 4 times. A woman answered. Tara. Iris, I saw the news alert. Tell me it's true. It's true. Oh God, a pause. How many are we looking at? I have 28 names still active. I need the original field records from the Ottawa archive. And I need someone who knows the protocol and isn't afraid. I'll be on the first flight out of Halifax. Tara. Yeah. I've been waiting 7 years to make this call. So have I, Iris. So have I. The first outside call came in at 5:45, a woman named Helen Fournier calling from Timmins, Ontario. Her husband Raymond had been a warrant officer with 3 PPCLI, injured outside Kandahar in 2004 in an IED blast, very much like the general's. He'd been in a chair for 21 years. He had a scar at the base of his skull that the local GP had always said was nothing to worry about. He was 64. They had 3 grandchildren he had never been able to carry. Raymond Fournier, number 17 on the list. Mrs. Fournier, Iris said, "Can you bring your husband to Toronto this week?" "I can," she said. "Is it? I don't want to hope if it isn't." Her voice broke once cleanly and then held. "Is there a real chance?" "I won't promise you he'll walk, but I will promise you this. There is a road we haven't tried yet, and it exists. It is real. I have seen it." On the other end of the line, Helen Fournier was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very carefully, as though she was handling something fragile, "He hasn't slept through a night in 21 years. The nerve pain. Is that something you can help with?" "Yes. When we take the bridge offline for calibration, the signal load that has been running against his atrophied tissue for 2 decades stops. His body will rest in a way it hasn't since 2004. I have seen it happen. I will see it happen with him." Helen Fournier began to cry, quietly, across a long-distance line from a city 4 hours north, the kind of crying that doesn't get heard often. "We'll be there Thursday," she said. "We'll be ready," Iris said. She wrote the name on the yellow pad, Fournier Raymond, number 17, Thursday. The phone rang again. By 9 o'clock, she had 8 names and 8 families and 8 men. At 11, an unknown number, she picked it up. A voice she had not heard in 7 years said her name. "Captain Langdon." She closed her eyes. "Colonel Whitmore. I'll be in Toronto tomorrow morning." "I'll be here, sir." The line went dead. She set the phone down. She picked up the yellow pad and turned to a fresh page. She wrote one word at the top. She underlined it. Intact. She turned off the light and walked home through a March evening that was colder than it looked, the kind of cold that comes off Lake Ontario at the end of winter and settles into the streets with quiet intention. The streetlights on University Avenue were on in long rows. She walked with her hands in her coat pockets and her chin level, and she did not feel small. Colonel Whitmore arrived at 7:58 the next morning, older than she remembered, his hair gone to white above the ears, his civilian suit dark and well-fitted and not quite able to disguise 30 years of posture. A younger man carrying a government lawyer's briefcase followed him in. They sat. Whitmore set a folder on the desk and did not open it. "Captain, the materials you used yesterday were removed from a federal research program. The materials were signed out under my name before the program was sealed, sir. The program was declassified in 2019. The protocols are public record. The procedure you performed was not pre-approved under any current clinical framework. The procedure was within the scope of the published 2019 declassification protocol. The patient gave informed consent. The neurological assessment was conducted under standard nursing scope with physician oversight." She looked at him calmly. "You're not here about the law, Colonel. The law is fine. You're here because this is about to become very public, and the department would like to manage it." Whitmore's jaw worked. "The government wishes to conduct a formal review before any further procedures are." The door opened. Ashford came in first. Behind him, Dr. Eleanor Cross. Behind her, a tall man in his late 60s who moved like someone who had been in uniform for most of his life. Major General Frank Dempsey, retired, now chair of the Harwick Medical Ethics Board. 2 lawyers and the hospital's communications director followed. Cross did not sit. She stood at the head of the desk and looked at Whitmore. "Colonel, I'm Eleanor Cross, Chief of Medical Staff. Before you continue, I want you to know that in the last 18 hours, I have spoken with the offices of 2 members of the Standing Committee on National Defense, the Office of the Surgeon General of the Canadian Armed Forces, and 2 veterans' rights legal organizations. Harwick Medical Center will pursue any necessary legal or institutional remedy to defend Captain Langdon and the work she has initiated. I want to ask you directly, are you prepared to defend a 22-year delay in front of a House committee?" Whitmore was silent. Dempsey spoke. His voice was low and unhurried. "Marcus, stand down. The program should never have been closed. The men and women on that list were ours. She found a way to bring them back. Let her finish." Whitmore looked at Dempsey. Dempsey did not blink. The government lawyer leaned in and said something quietly. Whitmore's mouth pressed into a line. He stood. He picked up the unopened folder. He looked at Iris. "I objected to the program closure in 2016, Captain. I lost that argument." "I know, sir." "I should have done what you did." "Yes, sir. You should have." He nodded once. He walked out. The lawyer followed. Cross sat down in the chair he had vacated. She put her hand flat on the desk. "Get to work, Captain." Tara Beckett arrived on the 10 o'clock flight from Halifax. She walked into the second-floor office with a black canvas duffel and an expression that broke the moment she saw Iris standing at the desk. They looked at each other across the room for a long moment, and then Tara set down the duffel and they held each other, quick and hard, and 7 years compressed into 5 seconds. Then they both stepped back and there was no more time. Tara had brought copies, records she had kept quietly, in a lockbox in her basement in Dartmouth. 3 additional names, 2 in Alberta, 1 in Nova Scotia. Iris wrote them on the yellow pad. The general began physiotherapy on a Thursday. A long bright room on the 4th floor, 2 parallel bars, a physiotherapist named Finn, who had served 2 tours with the army before retraining, and who did not coddle anyone and was very good at his job. On 3, General, push down through your right heel, 1, 2, 3. The general pushed, his right knee straightened 1 degree. He made a sound, low and controlled. Again. He did it again, 2 degrees. By the end of the first week, he could hold his own weight on the bars for 6 seconds. By the end of the 3rd week, 12. By the end of the 6th week, he stood unassisted for 4 seconds, while Finn let go of the support belt and stepped back. Iris watched from the doorway. She did not say anything during these sessions, she just watched. At the end of the 8th week, the general was at the bars and Finn was adjusting the height. The general looked down at his own feet. He looked up at Iris, who was standing against the wall with her arms crossed. He said very quietly, "Move back, Captain." She moved back. The general released the right bar. He shifted his weight. He moved his right foot forward 8 inches and set it down. He moved his left foot forward 6 inches and set it down. He gripped the bar again. He looked at her. She looked at him. She did not smile. He did not smile, but something passed between them that didn't need a name. Raymond Fournier came the following week. He was 64, and he had not slept through the night in 21 years. And when Iris pressed her finger to the marker at the base of his skull, he went very still and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, that he could feel his left ankle. Helen Fournier, standing behind his wheelchair with her hands on the handles, made no sound at all. She simply reached around from behind and held both of her husband's hands in hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, and Iris kept her face composed and wept later, alone, in the stairwell at the far end of the 2nd floor where nobody went. Not every man on the list could be saved. 2 had died in the years she had been waiting. 3 could not be found. 2 more had atrophied too far. The implants degraded, the peripheral nerves too quiet to wake. She met with each of them and she did not lie. She told them what the technology could and could not do. And they thanked her and she stayed in the room and let them speak. One of them, a master corporal named Gerald Osborne, who had been a combat engineer with 1 combat engineer regiment, gripped her hand at the end of their meeting and looked at her for a long moment. "You came back for us," he said. "You came back." "Yes, sir, I came back." He died 5 weeks later. His wife sent Iris a card. It said only, "He died knowing someone remembered." Iris kept it in the top drawer of her desk. 6 months after the morning she had pushed open the door of Bay 7, Harwick Medical Center held a ceremony in its main auditorium. It was not a press event. The press had already happened. 2 weeks of national coverage in April, a quieter May, a paper in the Canadian Journal of Military Medicine in June, with both Iris's name and Ashford's on it. Ashford had insisted. Iris had not objected. This was internal, staff, families, the veterans themselves. In the front 2 rows sat 11 men and women in service uniform. Canadian Army greens, Navy blues, Air Force dress uniform. Each one had arrived at Harwick in a wheelchair. Each one was now standing for at least part of the day. 5 walked with canes, 3 with light braces, 3 unassisted. Their uniforms had been taken out of storage and fitted by tailors, and in some cases let out and in other cases taken in, and every one of them had refused to wear civilian clothes for this. The general was among them. He stood at the end of the front row, cane in his left hand, Sylvie on his right. Adrian stood 1 step behind. Cross spoke. She was brief and precise. She introduced the program, the research, the doctors, the physiotherapy staff. She introduced Finn. She introduced Tara Beckett, who was in the 2nd row, in a dark blazer, her expression composed in the way of someone who has been waiting a very long time for a particular moment to arrive. She did not introduce Iris. Iris had asked her not to. Then she said, "Brigadier General Tremblay has asked for the floor." The general stepped forward from the end of the row. He used the cane. He walked to the podium, 7 steps, slow and deliberate, and his own, and he set the cane against the side and gripped the lectern. He looked out at the room. "I was paralyzed for 22 years, he said. I was told by 9 doctors across 4 provinces and 1 American state that I would die in that chair. I told my daughter to stop hoping. I told my son. I told my wife before she passed. And then I stopped hoping for myself." He paused. "On a Tuesday morning in March, my daughter brought me to this hospital. A nurse came into the exam room. She did her job. She looked at me. She actually looked at me. The room had not moved. In 6 months, with the help of every person in this building and many who aren't here today, 11 Canadians who were left behind by their own government have stood up from their chairs. 3 more come next month. 4 more after that. He let that sit. There are 3 people on my list who didn't live to see this day. To those men and women, I carry you with me. I will not forget. His voice did not break. 40 years of command had trained that out of him, but his eyes were bright. I want to thank Dr. Ashford, who had the honesty to be wrong in front of witnesses and the courage to be right afterward. I want to thank Dr. Cross and her entire team. I want to thank my children, who never stopped hoping even when I ordered them to. And I want to thank one more person. Someone whose name does not appear on any official document. Someone who is, by every formal military and medical measure, only a nurse. He looked along the front row. Each of the veterans met his eyes in turn. Captain Iris Langdon, would you come forward? Iris was in the 3rd row. She had been told there would be a presentation. She had not been told it would involve her. She stood. She walked to the front. Her scrubs were the same bright teal blue. The compass pin was above her name tag. The general left the podium. He walked the 4 steps to her without the cane, slowly, steadily, on his own legs, and the room watched every step, and he stopped in front of her. He brought his right hand to his temple. He saluted. In the front 2 rows, 11 veterans stood, 5 on canes, 3 in light braces, 3 on their own feet. Each one brought a hand to their temple. From the 2nd row, Tara Beckett stood, civilian clothes, no uniform, hand at her temple. Finn stood from the 3rd row. From the back of the auditorium, Dr. Victor Ashford, who had never served a day in any uniform, raised his right hand in an imperfect civilian salute and held it. Iris's throat closed once. Her eyes stayed level, her chin stayed level. She raised her right hand, the one with the scar, the one that had pressed the marker, the one that had not opened the pouch for 7 years, and she returned the salute. She held it. Then she brought it down. The room began to applaud, quietly at first, then louder, then it went on for a long time. Afterward, Raymond Fournier found her first. He didn't speak. He took her right hand in both of his and held it. Helen Fournier stood beside him. She said, "He slept 8 hours the first night in hospital. I sat in the chair beside the bed and I watched him breathe. I didn't sleep myself because I didn't want to miss a second of it." Iris nodded. Helen said, "That's all I needed in 21 years, 8 hours of peace." Sylvie came last. She put her arms around Iris without asking and held on for 5 full seconds. Then she stepped back, took a breath and said, "My father slept in the downstairs den for 22 years because we couldn't get the chair up the stairs. Last weekend he walked up to his old room. He said he wants to sleep in his own bed. He says he wants his books back on his nightstand. He says," she stopped. "He says he wants to wake up in the morning in the room where he used to think about the day ahead." "Sylvie," Iris said, "your father did that. You and Adrian did that. I opened a pouch." "You opened a pouch nobody knew was there." "Yes. That's everything." Sylvie walked back to her father. The general was standing near the front of the room, Adrian at his side, talking to 2 of the other veterans. Sylvie took her place beside him, and he turned his head when he felt her there. Ashford came up beside Iris. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one. "Black, no milk," he said. "You mentioned it once." She looked at him. "There are 4 names on the list we still haven't reached," he said. "I know. I want to help find them." She looked at him for a moment. "Then yes, doctor." He nodded once. He drank his coffee. Iris turned and walked out of the auditorium, down the long corridor toward the elevators, past the consultation desk where 6 months ago a man had spoken to the clock instead of to her, past Bay 3 where she had restocked supplies on a Tuesday morning that had started like every other. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The floors smelled of the same disinfectant they always had. Late afternoon light came through the high windows at the end of the hall in long pale rectangles, the particular light of an Ontario spring that doesn't quite believe in itself yet. The elevator opened. She stepped off on the 4th floor. At the far end of the corridor, through the glass panel of Bay 7, she could see a new family. An older man in a wheelchair, his head down. A woman beside him with her hand on his shoulder. A daughter, maybe, or a wife. The man's coat was open at the collar, and in the hollow above his clavicle, just to the left, there was a mark. She couldn't see it clearly from here. She didn't need to. Iris Langdon walked to the end of the hallway, placed her hand on the door, and pushed it open. "Good morning. I'm Iris Langdon. I'll be your intake nurse today."